The moment Amara asked the stranger to dance with her, just to make her ex-mate jealous, every wolf in the tavern went silent. His golden eyes locked onto hers, ancient and predatory, and she felt power press against her skin like a physical weight. Then he smiled, leaned close enough that his breath warmed her neck and whispered 5 words that changed everything. "Let him watch me claim you." She didn't know it then, but the man whose hand she just took wasn't just any wolf. He was the Alpha King, and her rejected mate had just made the worst mistake of his life. The bass line thundered through the Midnight Howl Tavern, vibrating up through the worn floorboards and into Amara's bones. She sat motionless in her corner booth, fingers wrapped around a glass of honey mead she hadn't touched in over an hour. The amber liquid caught the dim red and gold lights that pulsed overhead, casting shadows across faces that blurred into strangers and ghosts. Cedar smoke hung thick in the air, mingling with spilled whiskey and the wild, restless energy that always came before a full moon. Wolves from every pack in the territory filled the space: Silverfang, Nightshade, even a few rogues lurking near the back. This was neutral ground, the only place where ancient rivalries dissolved into temporary peace, where everyone could pretend they were just people looking to forget their problems for a few hours. Amara understood that need intimately. 3 weeks, 21 days since her world had shattered, since the mate bond that had once sung in her veins like electricity had been severed, leaving behind a hollow ache that never stopped throbbing. Her wolf whimpered somewhere deep inside, a broken thing that had stopped howling after the first week. Now it just existed, silent, wounded, lost. She'd told herself she could handle this, that she was strong enough to rebuild herself piece by piece, to wake up each morning and pretend the emptiness wasn't consuming her from the inside out. She'd thrown herself into her work at the healer's circle, taking double shifts until exhaustion became a mercy. She'd avoided pack gatherings, dodged concerned friends, smiled until her face ached when anyone asked if she was okay. But she wasn't okay. She was a ghost haunting her own life. The tavern door swung open, bringing with it a gust of night air and the sharp scent of pine. Amara's gaze drifted toward the entrance out of habit, not interest, and her entire body went rigid. Alpha Rylan stood in the doorway, broad-shouldered and infuriatingly composed, surveying the crowd like he owned every inch of space his eyes touched. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his leather jacket fitting like it had been tailored to display every line of controlled power. He was beautiful in that cruel, untouchable way that had once made her heart race. Now it just made her chest constrict until she couldn't breathe. But it wasn't him that made her stomach twist into knots. It was her. Celeste Thorne materialized at his side like she'd been summoned, tall, willowy, with silver blonde hair that cascaded down her back in perfect waves. Her dress was midnight blue silk that probably cost more than Amara's rent, clinging to curves that seemed designed to make other women feel inadequate. She was the daughter of the Moonshadow Pack's Alpha, politically connected, flawlessly beautiful, and exactly the kind of Luna a rising Alpha should choose, everything Amara wasn't. Welcome back, my amazing viewers. Before we dive deeper into the story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love seeing how far our stories reach. All right, settle in, take a breath, and let's get back to it. Rylan's arm settled possessively around Celeste's waist, his hand resting against her hip with casual ownership. They moved through the crowd together, wolves parting instinctively to let them pass. Celeste laughed at something he said, the sound carrying over the music. Light, musical, perfectly pitched to draw attention. Amara's grip tightened on her glass until her knuckles went white. She watched them approach the bar, watched Celeste lean into Rylan's side like she belonged there, watched him smile down at her with an ease that had never quite existed when he looked at Amara. Even from across the room she could feel the weight of their connection, the way they fit together like pieces of a puzzle that had finally found their match. The perfect Alpha and his perfect Luna-to-be. The memory crashed over her without warning, dragging her under like a riptide. 3 weeks ago. The blood moon hanging heavy and red in the night sky. The sacred clearing where pack bonds were made and broken under the moon goddess's witness. Rylan had asked her to meet him there. She'd gone with hope still flickering stupidly in her chest, believing he wanted to complete their bond, to make their mate connection official before the pack. Instead, he'd stood before her with eyes like stone and said the words that would haunt her forever. I, Alpha Rylan of the Silverfang Pack, reject you, Amara Hale, as my mate and future Luna. The bond had snapped. Not gradually, not gently. It had shattered like glass inside her chest, every fragment cutting deep as it scattered. She dropped to her knees, gasping for air that wouldn't come, her wolf howling in agony as half her soul was ripped away. Rylan hadn't even stayed to watch her break. He'd turned and walked away, leaving her there on the ground, bleeding from a wound no one else could see. A burst of laughter from the bar yanked Amara back to the present. Celeste had her head thrown back, one perfectly manicured hand resting on Rylan's chest. He was grinning, looking more relaxed and content than Amara had ever seen him. 3 weeks, and he'd already moved on. 3 weeks, and he looked happier without her than he'd ever been with her. The realization hit like a physical blow. She hadn't just been rejected, she'd been discarded. Thrown away like something broken and worthless, replaced before the wound had even begun to heal. Her wolf stirred for the first time in days, not with strength, but with a pitiful whimper that made Amara's eyes burn. She blinked rapidly, refusing to let the tears fall. She wouldn't give him that. Wouldn't let anyone in this tavern see her shatter. But goddess, it hurt. It hurt like dying slowly, like every breath was an act of defiance against the part of her that wanted to stop fighting and just disappear. The music shifted. Something slower and more intimate. Rylan pulled Celeste onto the dance floor, and Amara couldn't look away. Couldn't tear her eyes from the scene even as it carved deeper into the wound that refused to heal. His hands settled on Celeste's waist. She draped her arms around his neck. They moved together with perfect synchronicity, and the entire tavern seemed to watch them. The Alpha and his chosen mate, the couple everyone had been expecting him to choose all along. Why wasn't I enough? The question had been circling her mind for 3 weeks, unanswered and unanswerable. She'd replayed every conversation, every moment, every time she'd failed to be what he needed. Maybe she wasn't pretty enough, strong enough, worthy enough. Maybe her bloodline wasn't impressive enough. She was just a healer's daughter, not alpha-born like Celeste. Maybe. You look like you're deciding whether to cry or burn the place down. The voice came from directly beside her, deep and smooth with an edge that cut through the noise like a blade through silk. Amara's head snapped up, heart lurching. A man stood there, though man felt inadequate to describe him. He was tall enough to make her feel small even while sitting, with raven dark hair that fell just past his collar and features that seemed carved from stone and shadow. But it was his eyes that stole her breath. Gold, not the warm amber gold of most wolves, but something different. Ancient, molten. Like the sun itself had been captured and set burning behind his gaze. She hadn't heard him approach, hadn't sensed him. And that alone sent a warning shiver down her spine, because wolves, always, sensed each other, especially in crowded spaces. Her wolf should have alerted her to another predator moving into her territory. Instead, her wolf had gone completely, unnaturally still. Amara's voice came out rough, and she cleared her throat. I was going for unbothered. The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but close. You're failing spectacularly. Heat flooded her cheeks. She hadn't wanted company, hadn't wanted anyone to witness her pathetic vigil in the corner, nursing her wounds while her ex-mate celebrated his new life. But something about this stranger's presence, the way he looked at her without pity, without the careful sympathy she'd grown to hate, made the loneliness ache a little less. His gaze was steady, assessing, like he could see straight through her carefully constructed walls to the shattered mess underneath. But instead of flinching away from what he found there, he seemed interested. "The night's still young," he said, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear over the music. "Whatever you're running from, you don't have to face it alone." Amara's throat tightened. She glanced back toward the dance floor, where Rylan and Celeste were still wrapped in each other's arms, lost in their perfect moment. When she looked back at the stranger, something shifted in his golden eyes, understanding maybe, or recognition of a pain that matched her own. "Sometimes," he said softly, "the best revenge is reminding them what they lost." And for the first time in 3 weeks, Amara felt something other than hollow. She felt dangerous. The words hung between them like a challenge, and Amara found herself leaning forward despite every instinct that whispered, "Danger." "And what would you know about loss?" she asked, trying to sound skeptical rather than desperate. The stranger's expression shifted, something raw and ancient flickering behind those impossible gold eyes before he shuttered it away. "More than you'd believe," he said quietly. Then, as if shaking off old ghosts, he straightened. "But tonight isn't about my past. It's about your future." Amara's wolf stirred again, not with the broken whimper she'd grown accustomed to, but with something closer to curiosity. Alert. Watchful. She studied him more carefully now. His presence was unlike any wolf she'd encountered. There was a weight to him, a gravity that made the air feel thicker, charged with electricity she couldn't name. He wore all black, fitted pants, a shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, revealing corded muscle and old scars that suggested violence as casual as breathing. No pack insignia, no territorial markers, nothing to identify him except the dangerous calm that radiated from him like heat from a forge. "You're not from any of the local packs," she said. It wasn't a question. "No." He didn't elaborate, and somehow that single word felt like a door closing on questions she hadn't yet asked. "Then what are you doing here? The Midnight Howl isn't exactly a tourist destination." His mouth curved into something that might have been amusement. "Maybe I came looking for someone worth finding." The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. Amara glanced away, suddenly too aware of how close he was standing, how the scent of him, leather and night air and something wild she couldn't place, seemed to wrap around her. "I feel like I'm being watched," she admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "Not just by you. Like there are eyes on me from every corner of this room." "There are." He said it matter-of-factly, without apology. "You're sitting with me. That makes you interesting." "Interesting or endangered?" "Perhaps both." His smile was sharp enough to cut. "Does that frighten you?" It should have. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this man, this wolf, was dangerous in ways she couldn't begin to understand. But the broken part of her, the part that had spent 3 weeks feeling invisible and discarded, thrived on the attention. "I'm not sure yet," she said honestly. "Good." He shifted his weight and she noticed how other wolves in nearby booths leaned subtly away, as if their instincts recognized a predator they couldn't consciously identify. Fear keeps you alive, but too much of it keeps you small. Amara's fingers tightened around her glass. Across the tavern, Rylan's laugh rang out again, and she felt the familiar twist of pain in her chest. Before she could second-guess herself, before courage could fail her, she set down her mead and met the stranger's golden eyes. "Would you dance with me?" He went very still. "Is that what you want? My rejected mate is watching." The words tasted bitter and sweet at once. "And I want him to see that I'm not broken." Even though she was. Even though every piece of her felt fractured and wrong. The stranger studied her for a long moment, and she had the unsettling feeling he could see every crack in her armor, every wound she was trying to hide. Then he extended his hand, long fingers, calloused palms, a heavy silver ring on his thumb carved with symbols she didn't recognize. "One dance," he said, his voice dropping to something that felt like a promise and a threat wrapped together. "Make him remember what he lost." Amara placed her hand in his. His grip was firm as he pulled her to her feet, his other hand settling at the small of her back with a touch that was somehow both gentle and commanding. He guided her through the crowd with ease, and she watched in amazement as wolves parted before them without being asked. They simply moved, instinctively yielding space. The dance floor was packed, bodies pressed close in the dim lighting, but when the stranger, she still didn't know his name, led her to the center, a circle of space opened around them, as if choreographed. The song shifted to something slower, more primal, a bass line that pulsed like a heartbeat, layered with haunting vocals that spoke of longing and wildness and things too ancient to name. His hand moved from her back to her waist, pulling her closer. "What's your name?" he asked, his breath warm against her temple. "Amara." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Amara Hale." Amara. The way he said it, like he was tasting each syllable, committing it to memory, sent heat flooding through her. "I'm Kieran. Just Kieran. No pack name, no territory. As mysterious as everything else about him." They began to move, and Amara realized immediately that this wasn't like dancing with anyone else. Kieran led with absolute confidence, each step deliberate, each turn calculated. His movements were fluid grace wrapped around barely contained power, and she found herself following without thought, her body responding to cues she didn't consciously register. It felt less like dancing, and more like being claimed. Around them, conversations quieted. Wolves turned to watch, drawn by something they couldn't explain. The air grew heavier, charged with an energy that made Amara's skin prickle, and her wolf finally lift its head, not in pain, in awareness. "Is he watching?" Kieran murmured, spinning her gently before pulling her back against his chest. Amara caught sight of Rylan across the dance floor. He'd stopped moving entirely, his arms loose around Celeste, but his attention fixed on Amara with an intensity that bordered on feral. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping, and his eyes, goddess. His eyes burned with jealousy she'd never seen directed at her before. "Yes," she whispered. "Good." Kieran's hand tightened fractionally at her waist, his thumb tracing small circles against her hip that sent shivers down her spine. Let him see what real power looks like. The music swelled, and Kieran moved with it, guiding Amara through steps that felt choreographed by fate itself. She'd never been a particularly good dancer, but with him she didn't need to be. He led and she followed, and together they created something that felt less like performance and more like ritual. Something old, significant, sacred. Her wolf stirred deeper now, pushing to the surface with strength she hadn't felt since the rejection. But this wasn't the familiar presence that had been tied to Rylan. This was different, wilder, older, like waking a part of herself that had been sleeping for lifetimes. An echo of power that didn't belong to any pack she knew. "What are you?" she breathed, looking up at Kieran. His golden eyes caught the light, gleaming with something inhuman. Someone who recognizes what others are too blind to see. The song built to a crescendo, and Kieran dipped her low, his face hovering inches from hers. Time seemed to suspend. The tavern, the wolves, even Rylan, everything faded except those ancient gold eyes and the feeling of coming home to a place she'd never been. He pulled her upright slowly, deliberately, keeping her pressed against him as the music faded into the next song. "Let him watch," Kieran whispered against her ear, his voice carrying a weight that made her bones vibrate. "The moon never marks what's meant to be discarded." The words settled into her chest like a benediction, filling some of the hollow spaces the rejection had carved, and for the first time in 3 weeks, Amara's wolf didn't whimper. It growled. The song hadn't even finished when Amara felt the shift in the air, a spike of hostile energy that made every wolf in the vicinity tense. Kieran's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened protectively on her waist as he angled his body slightly, placing himself between her and the approaching threat. "Amara!" Rylan's voice cut through the music like a blade, sharp with fury and something that sounded disturbingly like possession. Her stomach dropped. She'd wanted him to notice, wanted him to feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused her. But she hadn't expected this. The barely controlled rage radiating from him as he shoved through the crowd, Celeste trailing behind with a mixture of concern and irritation on her perfect face. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Rylan demanded, stopping just at the edge of their circle. His alpha aura flared hot and aggressive, a wordless command that would have sent most wolves scrambling to bare their throats. Kieran didn't even flinch. "She's dancing," he said calmly, his voice carrying despite the music. "Last I checked, she's allowed." "With you?" Rylan's eyes flashed gold as his wolf surfaced. "She's—" He stopped himself, jaw clenching. "You don't know who you're dealing with, stranger. This is pack business." "She's what?" Kieran's tone remained conversational, almost pleasant, but something dangerous lurked beneath it. "Your mate? Because from what I understand, you severed that bond 3 weeks ago." Amara felt Rylan's gaze snap to her, accusatory. "You told him." "He didn't need to be told," Kieran answered before she could. "Rejection leaves a mark anyone with eyes can see." He paused, tilting his head slightly. "Anyone who cares to look, that is." Rylan's face flushed dark. "Stay out of this. Amara, we need to talk. Now." "No." The word came out steadier than Amara expected, strengthened by Kieran's solid presence beside her. "We don't. Like hell we don't." Rylan stepped closer, his dominance pushing outward in waves meant to force submission. "You can't just—" "Can't what?" Amara found courage she didn't know she possessed. "Move on? Find someone who actually wants me? You rejected me, Rylan. You don't get to be angry that I'm not sitting at home mourning what you threw away." His expression twisted with emotions she couldn't pass. Anger, definitely, but underneath it something that looked almost like regret. Or maybe just wounded pride. "You don't understand the position you're putting me in," he said, lowering his voice. "The pack is watching. Celeste's father is watching. You dancing with some random rogue makes me look—" "Weak," Kieran supplied, his tone sharp as cut glass. "Like you can't control what's yours? Here's a thought, Alpha. Don't discard what you're not willing to lose." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Rylan's entire body went rigid, his alpha dominance flaring so bright that wolves at nearby tables actually whimpered, heads automatically dropping in submission. But Kieran stood unmoved, meeting Rylan's challenge with something that wasn't just resistance, it was complete, utter indifference to his authority. "You don't know who you're talking to," Rylan growled, taking another step forward. His voice carried the alpha command that forced obedience from his pack. "I could have you thrown out of this territory by dawn." "You could try." Kieran's voice remained soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it more menacing. "But I wouldn't recommend it." Something shifted in the air then. A pressure that made Amara's ears pop and her wolf instinctively tuck itself smaller. It wasn't aggressive like Rylan's dominance. It was something else entirely. Something vast and ancient that pressed down on every wolf in the tavern like the weight of mountains. Rylan's eyes widened. Around them, wolves who'd been watching the confrontation suddenly found themselves bowing, not intentionally but instinctively, their bodies responding to a power their conscious minds couldn't identify. Even pack alphas in the crowd dropped their gazes, confusion flickering across their faces as they fought against the compulsion and lost. Celeste grabbed Rylan's arm. "Rylan, maybe we should—" "Shut up," he snapped, never taking his eyes off Kieran. But Amara noticed his hands had started to tremble, and the aggressive set of his shoulders had begun to curl inward, defensive rather than threatening. He felt it. Whatever Kieran was, Rylan's wolf recognized something that made it want to bare its throat and back away slowly. "Last chance," Kieran said quietly, and Amara heard the steel beneath velvet. "Walk away. Take your mate and enjoy your evening. Leave Amara to enjoy hers." "She's not yours to protect," Rylan bit out, but his voice lacked conviction now. "No," Kieran agreed. "She's her own to protect. I'm simply making sure she has the space to do so." Rylan's jaw worked like he was chewing on words he couldn't quite spit out. His pride warred with instinct, and Amara watched the exact moment instinct won. His shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly, his aggressive stance easing into something more neutral. But his eyes burned with humiliation and rage as they fixed on Amara. "This isn't over," he said, and it sounded like both a threat and a plea. "We need to talk about... There are things you don't understand, Amara. Things about the bond, about why you what?" Amara demanded, anger finally cutting through her fear. "Why you rejected me. Why you moved on before the bond was even cold. I think I understand perfectly, Rylan." "You don't," he insisted, frustration cracking his voice. "If you'd just listen..." "The lady doesn't want to listen," Kieran interrupted, his tone still dangerously calm. "And continuing to push when someone has clearly declined is behaviour beneath an alpha. Don't you agree?" It wasn't really a question, and everyone within earshot knew it. Celeste tugged harder on Rylan's arm, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "Rylan, please, you're making a scene. Your father is watching from the upper level." That finally penetrated. Rylan's gaze flicked upward briefly, and whatever he saw there made his face go pale. When he looked back at Kieran, some of the fight had drained from him, replaced by wariness and something that looked uncomfortably like fear. "Fine," he ground out. "But this conversation isn't finished, Amara. There are things you need to know, things about your..." He stopped himself, glancing at Kieran with obvious reluctance. "Just be careful who you trust." The irony of that statement coming from him would have been funny if it didn't make Amara want to scream. Rylan turned and stalked back through the crowd, Celeste hurrying to keep pace. Wolves parted quickly, eager to get out of the path of his anger. Amara watched them go, her heart hammering against her ribs. The oppressive weight in the air lifted gradually, and she heard the collective exhale of wolves who hadn't realised they'd been holding their breath. "Are you all right?" Kieran asked, his hand still steady at her waist. Amara nodded, not trusting her voice. She was trembling, from adrenaline, from anger, from the intoxicating rush of standing up to Rylan for the first time in her life. Movement caught her eye. Two men had materialised from the shadows near the tavern's entrance, both tall, both dressed in dark clothing that seemed designed to help them disappear into corners. They stood with military precision, their attention fixed not on the crowd but on Kieran, awaiting some silent signal. Guards. He had guards. "Who are you?" Amara whispered, pieces clicking together in her mind. The dominance that made alphas bow, the guards waiting in shadows, the complete lack of fear in the face of an alpha's rage. Kieran's golden eyes studied her face, and she had the sense he was making some kind of calculation, weighing truths against timing. "Someone who recognises value when he sees it," he said finally, echoing his earlier non-answer. "That's not..." "I know." He brushed a strand of hair from her face with unexpected gentleness. "But it's the answer you're getting tonight." The music had shifted to something faster, lighter, as if the tavern itself was trying to shake off the tension. Wolves gradually returned to their conversations, though Amara noticed more than a few curious glances still directed their way. "Thank you," she said quietly, for standing up for me. No one's done that in a long time." Kieran's expression shifted, something almost sad flickering behind his eyes before he shuttered it. He cupped her chin gently, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. "You shouldn't thank me, Amara," he said, his voice dropping to something intimate and dangerous. "I only protect what's mine." The possessive claim should have set off alarm bells, should have made her pull away and demand explanations. Instead, her wolf purred for the first time since the rejection, and Amara found herself leaning into his touch like a flower turning toward the sun. "Come," Kieran said, his hand sliding from her chin to the small of her back. "You look like you could use some air." Before Amara could respond, he was guiding her through the crowd with that same effortless authority, wolves parting without conscious thought. She caught glimpses of curious faces, heard the whispers that followed in their wake, but Kieran seemed oblivious to it all, or perhaps just indifferent. He led her to a quiet alcove near the back of the tavern, where floor-to-ceiling windows looked out onto the forest beyond. Moonlight spilled across the worn wooden floor, silver and bright, painting everything in shades of blue and shadow. The music was muted here, reduced to a distant pulse that felt more like a heartbeat than sound. Amara leaned against the window frame, suddenly exhausted. The confrontation with Rylan had drained something vital from her, leaving her hollow and shaking. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Stand up to him. He's an alpha. He could make things difficult for you." Kieran's laugh was soft, almost bitter. "He could try. You're not afraid of him?" "No." He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, but not touching. "Should I be?" Amara studied his profile in the moonlight, the sharp line of his jaw, the aristocratic slope of his nose, the way shadows pooled in the hollow of his throat. "Most wolves are afraid of alphas. It's instinct. I'm not most wolves. I'm starting to realize that." She hesitated, then asked the question burning in her chest. "What are you, Kieran?" He turned to face her fully, and the moonlight caught his eyes, making them glow like molten gold. "Someone who's been searching a long time for something worth finding." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you tonight." He reached out, tracing the line of her jaw with one finger. The touch was feather-light, but it sent electricity racing down her spine. "You're a healer, aren't you? I can smell it on you. Sage and moonflower, silver and salt." Amara blinked, surprised. "How did you—" "Your hands." He caught one of hers, turning it palm up in the moonlight. Scarred from burning sage, calloused from grinding herbs, and here. His thumb brushed over her wrist, where a faint silver mark traced her veins. "Moon-touched, you've been blessed by a high priestess." Heat flooded her cheeks. No one had ever looked at her this closely, noticed these small details that made up who she was. Rylan had barely glanced at her hands in 6 months of courtship. "You see a lot," she whispered. "I see what matters." His grip on her wrist tightened fractionally. "Your ex-mate was a fool to let you go." "He had his reasons." The words tasted bitter. I'm not alpha-born. My bloodline isn't impressive. I'm just a healer's daughter from the edge of pack territory, not exactly lunar material." Kieran's expression hardened. "Blood doesn't determine worth, power does. And you have more of it than you realize. I don't have any power. My wolf is—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "Broken, shattered, wrong." "Sleeping," Kieran corrected gently. "Not broken. There's a difference." Before she could ask what he meant, he shifted, and moonlight spilled across his collarbone where his shirt had pulled open. Amara's breath caught. There, just above his heart, was a scar unlike anything she'd ever seen. A crescent moon intertwined with what looked like claw marks, raised and silver, and beneath the moon's touch, it was glowing. Faint but unmistakable, pulsing with a light that seemed to come from within. "What is that?" she breathed, reaching toward it instinctively. Kieran caught her hand before she could touch it. "A mark," he said quietly. "One I've carried for longer than you've been alive. But it's glowing. Scars don't glow. This one does." His jaw tightened. Under the full moon, it remembers what it was meant for. What was it meant for? He released her hand and stepped back, shadows falling across his face. Names hold power, Amara. Mine carries too much of it. Frustration flared through her. You keep speaking in riddles. If you want me to trust you, I don't want you to trust me. The words were sharp, almost harsh. I want you to trust yourself, to remember what your wolf knows that your mind has forgotten. My wolf doesn't know anything except how to hurt. Doesn't it? He moved closer again, crowding into her space until she was pressed against the window frame with nowhere to go. His hand came up to rest against the glass beside her head, caging her in. What is it telling you right now? Amara closed her eyes, reaching for her wolf. It stirred sluggishly at first, then with more energy as she focused. And beneath the familiar ache of the broken bond with Rylan, she felt something else. Something new. A pull, faint but growing stronger, like a thread of moonlight connecting her chest to his. Her wolf lifted its head, whimpering not in pain but in recognition. Her eyes snapped open. What did you do to me? Nothing. Kieran's voice was rough. The moon goddess does as she wills. We're just finally listening. The scar on his chest flared brighter, and Amara gasped as her own chest burned in response. Not pain, heat spreading through her ribs like wildfire, pooling in the hollow where the mate bond used to live. Her wolf surged forward with sudden violent awareness. Mate. The word echoed through her mind, primal and absolute. Mate, mate, mate. No, Amara whispered, shaking her head. It's not possible. You can't have two mates. The moon doesn't... The moon does what she wants, Kieran said softly. His hand moved from the glass to cup her face, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realised had fallen. And sometimes, when the first bond was forced or false, she corrects her mistake. The scar pulsed between them, brighter now, and Amara felt the pull strengthen into something undeniable. Her wolf howled, not in pain, but in triumph. And Amara realised with bone-deep certainty that everything she thought she knew about fate had just shattered and reformed into something terrifying and inevitable. The moment shattered when Kieran's phone buzzed in his pocket. His expression flickered, annoyance, then resignation, as he pulled it out and glanced at the screen. The warmth in his eyes cooled to something harder, more distant. I need to take this, he said, his voice carrying an edge that hadn't been there moments before. Don't move. Before Amara could respond, he was stepping away, phone already pressed to his ear. She watched him move toward the windows that opened onto a small terrace, his posture shifting with each step, shoulders straightening, authority settling over him like a cloak. Through the glass she could see him clearly in the moonlight. The charming stranger who danced with her had vanished completely. In his place stood someone else entirely. I don't care what the council wants, Kieran said, his voice carrying despite the closed window. Tell them I'll arrive when I arrive, not before. He paused, listening. No. The Silver Fang matter is under control. I'm exactly where I need to be. His free hand gestured sharply, a command, not a request. Even from inside, Amara felt the weight of his authority, the absolute certainty that whoever was on the other end of that call would obey without question. Handle it, Kieran continued, his tone dropping to something that made Amara's wolf instinctively lower its head. That's why I have commanders. If every minor dispute requires my personal attention, what exactly am I paying you for? Another pause, his jaw clenched. No, she stays under my protection until I determine otherwise. Anyone who challenges that answers to me directly. The threat in those words was unmistakable. Are we clear? He ended the call without waiting for confirmation and stood there for a moment, silhouette sharp against the moonlit forest. Then he rolled his shoulders, as if shaking off the weight of whatever burden the call had placed on him. As he turned back toward the tavern, moonlight washed over him fully, and Amara saw it. The scar on his chest wasn't just glowing, it was illuminated, silver light pulsing in intricate patterns that spread across his skin like veins of starlight. And there, at the centre of the crescent moon, another symbol revealed itself. A crown, small and delicate, woven into the scar tissue itself. The mark of kingship. Amara's blood went cold. "Moon's mercy," she whispered. The alcove suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. Her mind raced, pieces clicking together that she'd been too dazed to see before. The dominance that made Alpha's bow, the guards waiting in shadows. The way he'd spoken about packs and territories like someone who stood above them all. The Alpha King goes where he pleases. The old stories flooded back, tales the elders whispered when they thought younger wolves weren't listening. Stories of a wolf older than the packs themselves, blessed or cursed by the moon goddess to rule over all territories. A king whose power was absolute, whose word was law, whose very existence kept the fragile peace between warring packs. Most wolves believed he was a myth, a boogeyman alphas invoked to keep their pack members in line, but the stories said he bore a mark, a crescent scar that glowed with the moon's blessing. The alcove door opened, and Kieran stepped back inside. The glow had faded from his scar, hidden once more beneath his shirt, but Amara couldn't unsee it. "You're him," she breathed. "The Alpha King." Kieran went still. For a long moment he simply looked at her, weighing something she couldn't name. Then he sighed, a sound that carried centuries of weariness. Yes. The single word felt like a confession and a condemnation. "Why?" Amara's voice cracked. "Why are you here? Why approach me? Why?" She pressed her hands against her chest, where the phantom pull of the mate bond still burned. "Why does my wolf think you're—" "Because the moon makes no mistakes," Kieran said quietly, "even when we wish she would." A shadow fell across the alcove. Amara turned to find old Margot, one of the Crescent Ridge pack elders, standing in the doorway. Her rheumy eyes were fixed on Kieran with a mixture of awe and terror. "Child," Margot said, her voice trembling. "Do you know what you've done? Who you've—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "The Alpha King is no myth, Amara. He's the wolf all other alphas fear, the one they whisper about in the dark, hoping he never turns his attention their way." "I'm aware," Amara managed. Margot's gaze flickered to Kieran, and she immediately dropped her eyes, baring her throat in submission. "Forgive me, sire. I meant, no." "It's fine," Kieran said, his voice gentler than Amara expected. "Leave us." The elder fled without argument. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Amara's mind spun, trying to make sense of everything. The mate bond, Kieran's identity, Rylan's rejection. Rylan's rejection. The memory surfaced unbidden, that night under the blood moon, the way Rylan had looked at her before speaking the words that shattered her world. She'd been so focused on the pain, on the bond breaking, that she hadn't registered the expression on his face. Terror, not disgust, not disappointment. Pure, primal fear. "He knew," she whispered, the realization hitting like a physical blow. "Rylan knew about you, about us, about—" Her legs went weak, and she grabbed the window frame for support. "That's why he rejected me. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because any alpha who stands between an alpha king and his true mate is signing his own death warrant," Kieran finished quietly. "Yes." Amara's breath came in short gasps. Everything she'd believed about the rejection, about herself, about her worth, had been built on a lie. "How long?" she demanded. "How long have you known?" Kieran's golden eyes held hers, ancient and unreadable. "The night you were born," he said softly. "My scar burned for the first time in 3 centuries. The moon whispered your name into my dreams, and I've been searching for you ever since." The confession hung between them, a truth so vast it threatened to drown her. 24 years, Amara breathed. "You've been searching for 24 years. "Yes." "And Rylan?" Her voice broke. He rejected me to save himself. Kieran's expression hardened. He rejected you because he's a coward who values his own life above his mate's happiness. Don't grant him the nobility of sacrifice. He felt the moon's pull toward me before your bond could fully form, and he ran. The cruelty of it stole her breath. Not rejected because she wasn't enough, but because she was too much, destined for someone too powerful for an ordinary alpha to risk claiming. Outside, the full moon rose higher, and Amara felt its pull like never before. Her wolf howled, not in pain anymore, but in fury and recognition and terrible, inevitable knowing. Amara found herself in the forest 3 hours past midnight, drawn by a pull she couldn't resist, even if she'd wanted to. The full moon hung heavy overhead, so bright it cast shadows sharp as daylight, turning the trees into silver sentinels and the moss-covered ground into something otherworldly. She'd left the tavern without saying goodbye, slipping out the back entrance while Kieran was occupied with another phone call. Part of her had hoped the distance would break whatever spell he'd cast over her, that the mate bond her wolf insisted was real would fade once she couldn't see him. Instead, it had only grown stronger. The pull led her deep into neutral territory, to a clearing she'd never seen before despite years of running these woods. Ancient oak trees formed a circle around a space where moonlight pooled like liquid silver, and in the centre stood Kieran, waiting as if he'd known exactly when she'd arrive. "You followed the bond," he said without turning. "Good." "I didn't have much choice." Amara stayed at the edge of the clearing, maintaining distance even though every instinct screamed at her to close it. "It's been burning in my chest for hours. I couldn't sleep, could barely breathe." "I know." He turned then, and the moonlight made his eyes glow pure gold. "I feel it too. Is this what it's supposed to be like?" The question came out more vulnerable than she'd intended. With Rylan, it was quieter, gentle. "This feels like fire," Kieran supplied. "Inevitability. The difference between a candle and a forest blaze." He moved toward her with that predatory grace, and she forced herself not to retreat. "That's because what you had with Rylan was a pale shadow of what the moon intended. A practice bond, perhaps. Preparation for the real thing." "Stop talking in metaphors and tell me the truth." Amara's voice shook, but she held her ground. "All of it. No more riddles, no more secrets. If you expect me to accept this, accept us, I need to understand." Kieran studied her for a long moment, something like approval flickering across his features. Then he nodded and gestured to a fallen log near the clearing's edge. "Sit. This story is older than any pack you know." Amara sat, and he settled beside her, close enough to touch but not touching, the space between them charged with electricity. "My name is Kieran Vega," he began, his voice taking on the cadence of ancient history. 347 years ago, I was crowned Alpha King by the moon goddess herself, chosen to unite the warring packs and bring peace to our kind. 300... Amara's breath caught. "That's not possible. Wolves don't live that long. Mortal wolves don't." His smile was bitter. "But the Alpha King is bound to the moon's cycle, blessed and cursed to live as long as the packs need guidance. I've watched generations rise and fall, seen empires built and destroyed, outlived everyone I ever loved." The loneliness in his voice made her chest ache. "For 2 centuries I ruled well," he continued. "United the territories, established laws, kept the peace. But power breeds envy, and eventually my own commanders betrayed me, poisoned me with silver and wolfsbane, left me for dead in a place where the moon's light couldn't reach. But you survived. Barely." He pulled his shirt aside, revealing the scar on his chest. In the moonlight it pulsed with that eerie silver glow. "The moon saved me, but the betrayal left its mark. I retreated from pack politics, ruled from the shadows, became the myth you grew up hearing. It was safer that way, for everyone." "Until now," Amara whispered. "Until the moon decided I'd been alone long enough." Kieran's hand moved to rest on the log between them, inches from hers. The blessing that made me Alpha King came with a promise. When I'd suffered enough, learned enough, grown worthy enough, the moon would provide my true mate. Someone strong enough to stand beside me, whose bloodline carried the ancient magic necessary to complete the bond. Amara's wolf stirred, recognition blooming in her chest. "Your great-great-grandmother," Kieran said softly, "was the moon priestess who performed my coronation. Her line has carried the moon's blessing for generations, diluted but never lost. When you were born, the magic in your blood called to the magic in mine, and the bond that should have formed immediately was delayed. Why? Because you were mortal, human-lived. The moon needed you to grow, to experience life, to become who you needed to be before the bond could fully manifest." His voice dropped. "And perhaps because I needed time to become who I needed to be as well." The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. That's why Rylan felt the pull. He sensed the moon's claim on me, even if he didn't understand what it meant. Yes. And rather than accept his place as a temporary guardian preparing you for your true destiny, he tried to claim you for himself. When he realized he couldn't, when the moon's will became too obvious to ignore, he rejected you rather than face the consequences of defying fate. Rage and grief warred in Amara's chest. All those months of believing she wasn't enough, that something was fundamentally wrong with her, when the truth was she'd been marked for something else entirely. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered. "Neither did I." Kieran finally closed the distance between their hands, his fingers brushing hers. The touch sent sparks racing up her arm, and her wolf howled in approval. But the moon rarely asks permission. She simply is, and we must decide whether to fight her will or surrender to it. "What if I fight?" His expression softened with something that might have been sadness. "Then you'll spend your life feeling incomplete, and I'll return to the shadows, and both of us will live with the knowledge of what we could have had." The bond between them pulsed stronger now, wrapping around her ribs like threads of moonlight, pulling her toward him with inexorable force. She could feel his heartbeat as if it were her own, sense his emotions bleeding through the growing connection, loneliness, hope, fear, desire. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Good." Kieran turned her hand over, tracing the lines of her palm. "Fear means you understand the magnitude of what's happening. Only fools approach destiny without fear. Are you afraid?" "Terrified," he echoed, and the honesty in his voice stole her breath. "I've lived 3 centuries, Amara. Loved and lost more times than I can count. Survived betrayal, war, endless isolation. And now the moon offers me something I stopped believing in. A true mate, a partner, a reason to fully return to the world I've been hiding from." His golden eyes met hers. "Yes, I'm terrified of losing you before I've even truly found you." The vulnerability in his confession cracked something open in her chest. She'd expected power, dominance, ancient authority. Instead, she found a man, or wolf, who'd been alone too long, hoping against hope that this time fate would be kinder. "What happens now?" she whispered. Kieran lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent fire racing through her veins. "Now, we let the bond grow. No rushing, no forcing. We give you time to grieve what you lost and accept what you've gained." His voice dropped to something almost reverent. "And we let the moon work her will." The scar on his chest blazed brighter, and Amara gasped as an answering mark flared to life on her own skin, right over her heart, a crescent moon identical to his. "You were never meant to be his," Kieran murmured, pulling her closer until their foreheads touched. "You were meant to awaken me." And as the full moon reached its zenith, Amara felt the final wall around her heart crumble, the bond snapping fully into place with a force that stole her breath and made her wolf sing. Amara made it halfway back to her apartment before they found her. She'd left the forest clearing with Kieran's kiss still burning on her lips, the mate bond humming steady and sure in her chest. He'd promised to see her tomorrow, to give her time to process everything, to let the bond settle before they moved forward. But the Silverfang pack had other plans. They came out of the shadows like wraiths, 6 of them, all warriors she recognized from pack gatherings. Marcus led them, Rylan's beta, his face twisted with righteous fury. "Amara Hale," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of pack law. "By order of Alpha Rylan, you are to come with us. You've been compromised by dark influence and require cleansing." Amara's wolf snarled, rising to the surface faster than it had in weeks. "I'm not part of your pack anymore. Rylan rejected me, remember? You have no authority over me." "You were born Silverfang," Marcus countered, moving closer. His men fanned out, cutting off escape routes. "That bond doesn't break with rejection. And when one of our own falls under the spell of a dangerous rogue, he's not a rogue." The words came out sharp, protective. "And I'm not under anyone's spell." "The stranger has addled your mind," another warrior said, Thomas, who'd once been kind to her. Now his eyes held only pity and disgust. "We've heard the reports. You danced with him, left with him, bore his mark on your skin. Whatever he's done to you, the pack healers can undo it." Amara's hand moved instinctively to her chest, where the crescent mark burned beneath her shirt. "You don't understand what you're dealing with." "We understand enough." Marcus lunged forward, grabbing her arm. "You're coming with us, by force if necessary." The bond in her chest flared hot, and somewhere in the distance she felt Kieran's instant response, fury and fear and mine roaring through the connection. "Let her go!" The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, carrying enough power to make the warriors stumble back. Kieran materialized from the shadows, his eyes blazing pure gold, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. "This is pack business," Marcus said, but his voice shook. "You have no right." "I have every right." Kieran's aura exploded outward, a crushing wave of dominance that brought all 6 warriors to their knees. They hit the ground hard, necks bared in involuntary submission, their wolves whimpering in terror. "She is mine. Anyone who touches her answers to me." More wolves emerged from the darkness, Kieran's guards moving with lethal precision. They surrounded the Silverfang warriors like predators circling prey. "You're making a mistake," Marcus gasped, fighting against the compulsion to submit. "Alpha Rylan won't—" "Rylan is a coward who rejected his mate to save his own skin." Kieran's voice was cold enough to freeze blood. "He has no claim here, no authority, no right to even speak her name." One of the warriors, a young male Amara didn't recognize, broke free of the dominance through sheer desperation. He lunged at Kieran, a silver blade flashing in his hand. Everything happened in slow motion. The blade arced toward Kieran's throat. His guards moved to intercept but were too far away, and Amara felt power surge through her veins, ancient, fierce, undeniable. Light exploded from her hands. Pure moonlight, silver and blinding, caught the warrior mid-strike and sent him flying backward. He hit a tree with a sickening crack and dropped, unconscious. The silver blade clattered harmlessly to the ground, smoking where her light had touched it. Silence fell like a hammer. Amara stared at her hands, which still glowed with residual power. Her wolf had never been able to do that. No wolf could do that except— "Moon Priestess bloodline," Kieran breathed, wonder and something like vindication in his voice. "I knew it." The Silverfang warriors were staring at her with undisguised horror. Marcus scrambled backward, his submission forgotten in the face of something far more terrifying than dominance. "She's cursed," he whispered. "The old magic, it's forbidden. It's inherited." Kieran moved to Amara's side, his presence steady and grounding. "From a bloodline older than your pack, blessed by the moon goddess herself. Your alpha knew this and rejected her anyway." His smile was sharp as broken glass. Imagine his terror when he realized what he'd thrown away. More movement in the trees. Amara tensed, but Kieran's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Stand down," he called, and a dozen more warriors emerged, But these weren't Silverfang. They wore black, moved with military precision, and their eyes glowed with the enhanced strength of elite guards. The Alpha King's personal army. Marcus tried one last time. Alpha Rylan will do nothing. Kieran's voice carried finality. Because if he or any member of his pack touches Amara again, I will dissolve the Silverfang pack entirely and scatter its members across territories where they'll be lucky to survive as rogues. He paused, letting the threat sink in. Do I make myself clear? The warriors nodded frantically, terror overriding pride. Good. Now leave. Tell your Alpha that his cowardice has consequences, and he's used up all the mercy he'll receive from me. They fled, dragging their unconscious companion with them, disappearing into the forest like the shadows they'd emerged from. Amara's legs gave out. Kieran caught her before she hit the ground, pulling her against his chest as tremors racked her body. The power that had surged through her was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. I don't understand, she whispered. What was that? How did I? Your bloodline carries the moon's blessing, Kieran murmured against her hair. It's been dormant, waiting for the right catalyst to awaken it. His arms tightened around her. Waiting for me. It's too much. I can't. You can. He pulled back just enough to cup her face, forcing her to meet his golden eyes. You just saved my life with power you didn't know you had. You faced down warriors who would have dragged you back to a pack that doesn't deserve you. You're stronger than you realize, Amara. Tears burned her eyes. I'm terrified. I know. His thumb brushed away a tear that escaped. But you're not alone anymore. The bond pulsed between them, warm and steady, and Amara felt his certainty bleeding through, his absolute faith in her, in them, in what they could become together. One of his guards approached cautiously. Sire, we should move. More may come. Kieran nodded but didn't release Amara. Instead, he lifted her effortlessly, cradling her against his chest like she weighed nothing. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere safe, somewhere they can't reach you. He started walking, his guards falling into formation around them. My territory, my home. The Alpha King's palace. Yes. He looked down at her, and in the moonlight his expression was fierce and tender at once. Now you understand, don't you? You're not my weakness, Amara. He pressed a kiss to her forehead as the last of the Silverfang warrior's sense faded into the night. You're my queen. The Moon Palace was nothing like Amara had imagined. She'd heard stories of its grandeur, white marble halls, silver fountains, gardens that bloomed eternal under the moon's blessing. But what Kieran brought her to was ruins. Beautiful, haunting ruins where nature had reclaimed what wolves had abandoned, where moonlight filtered through cracked domes and spilled across crumbling stone like liquid memory. It's been empty for over a century, Kieran said quietly, setting her down in what must have once been a throne room. Moss covered the floor in patches of soft green, and ancient columns rose toward a shattered ceiling that opened to the sky. The full moon gazed down at them like a watchful eye. After the betrayal, I couldn't bear to return, so I let it fall. Amara turned slowly, taking in the melancholy beauty. Carved into every surface were symbols she recognized from her healer training, moon phases, pack sigils, blessings in the old tongue. This place had been sacred once, a seat of power that united all wolves under one throne. Why bring me here? Because you need to understand what you've become part of. Kieran moved to a raised dais where two thrones sat side by side. One had crumbled to rubble, the other remained intact, waiting. And because the moon's truth lives strongest in places she once touched directly, he gestured for her to sit on the intact throne. Amara hesitated, then climbed the dais and lowered herself onto stone worn smooth by centuries of rulers. The moment she sat, power thrummed through the palace, a resonance that made the very air vibrate. The broken throne beside her began to glow. What's happening? Amara gasped, trying to stand, but Kieran's hand on her shoulder kept her seated. The palace recognizes you, he said, wonder threading through his voice. It's been waiting for you. Light spread from the glowing throne, knitting broken stone back together with threads of pure moonlight. Amara watched in awe as the second throne rebuilt itself, rising from rubble to match its companion, smaller, more delicate but no less regal, the Luna's throne. When the light faded, Kieran knelt before her, and the sight of the Alpha King on his knees stole her breath. There's a prophecy, he said softly. One the Moon Priestess spoke when she crowned me 3 centuries ago. I thought it was comfort, empty words to ease a newly made king. But she saw true. He looked up at her with those ancient gold eyes. She said, when the king has walked long enough in shadow, when he has learned the weight of loneliness and the price of power, the moon will grant him a second mate, one born of the first's blood, carrying her strength and wisdom destined to restore what was broken. Amara's heart hammered. The first? You had a mate before? Pain flickered across his features. Luna Seraphine, your great-great-great-grandmother. She was the Moon Priestess who crowned me, and the moon blessed us as mates shortly after. His voice went rough. She died in the Betrayal, poisoned with the same silver that nearly killed me. She was pregnant with our daughter. Tears burned Amara's eyes. Kieran. The daughter survived. I got her to safety before I fled, ensured she was raised by wolves loyal to the old ways. Your bloodline descends from her, from us, from the bond that was meant to unite the packs, but was cut short by treachery. The weight of it crashed over her. She wasn't just a random wolf marked by fate. She carried the blood of the first Lunar Queen, the genetic memory of a bond that had been stolen before it could fulfill its purpose. The moon doesn't make mistakes, Kieran continued, his hands resting gently on her knees. She delayed our reunion until you were strong enough, old enough in spirit if not in years, to bear the weight of what's coming. You are Seraphine's legacy and my second chance. Our bond isn't just personal, Amara. It's prophetic. I'm nobody, she whispered, just a healer from the edge of pack territory. I don't know how to be a queen. You saved my life tonight with power you didn't know you had. You faced down warriors and won. You looked at me, knowing what I am, and didn't run. Kieran rose and cupped her face tenderly. You're already everything a queen needs to be. The rest we'll figure out together. What if I fail? What if I'm not strong enough? Then we fail together. His thumb brushed her cheek. But I've lived 3 centuries, Amara. I've seen empires rise and fall, watched wolves stronger and more prepared than you crumble under less pressure. Yet here you are, rejected, attacked, thrust into a destiny you never asked for, and you're still standing, still fighting. His smile was soft, proud. You won't fail. It's not in your blood. The bond between them pulsed warm and steady, and Amara felt his absolute faith in her flowing through the connection. No doubt, no hesitation, just certainty that she was exactly who she needed to be. I'm scared, she admitted. Good. So am I. He pulled her up from the throne and into his arms. But we'll be scared together. She buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent, leather and night and home. For the first time since the rejection, she felt whole, complete, like all the broken pieces had finally found where they belonged. What do we do now? She murmured. Now, we prepare. The packs will resist. The council will challenge us. Rylan is already here. The voice came from the palace entrance. They spun to find Rylan standing in the archway, alone, his hands raised in surrender. He looked terrible, haggard, terrified, his alpha confidence stripped away to reveal the frightened man beneath. I'm not here to fight, he said quickly, as Kieran's guards materialized from the shadows. I'm here to warn you. Kieran's arm tightened around Amara protectively. Speak quickly. The council knows. Rylan's voice shook. About you, about her, about the bond. My father told them. They're gathering forces from every major pack. He looked at Amara, and she saw genuine regret in his eyes. They're coming for both of you, and they're bringing silver. The moon overhead darkened as clouds passed across its face, and Amara felt the prophecy's weight settle onto her shoulders like a mantle. The real battle was just beginning. They came at dawn, when the moon had set and its power waned. Dozens of warriors from every major pack, Moonshadow, Nightshade, Ironpaw, even scattered members of Silverfang who'd chosen council loyalty over their alpha's warnings. They surrounded the Moon Palace ruins with military precision, silver weapons glinting in the early light. At their head stood 3 council elders, ancient wolves whose authority had gone unchallenged for generations. Elder Thorn, Elder Blackwood, and Elder Frost. Their combined age exceeded 5 centuries, and their combined arrogance knew no bounds. Kieran Vega, Elder Thorn's voice carried across the ruins, amplified by power that made the stones tremble. You have broken sacred law by attempting to claim a mate through manipulation and dark influence. Surrender yourself and the girl for judgment. Amara stood beside Kieran on the palace steps, her hand clasped in his, the mate bond singing between them like a war cry. She wore clothes his guards had provided, fitted black that allowed movement, reinforced with subtle armour. She looked nothing like the broken she-wolf who'd sat alone in a tavern 3 days ago. She looked like a queen preparing for battle. Sacred law, Kieran repeated, his voice calm but carrying enough power to make wolves 3 rows back flinch. Tell me, elders, which law forbids an Alpha King from claiming his moon-blessed mate? You abdicated your throne when you fled, Elder Blackwood snarled. You have no authority here. I never abdicated. I withdrew. Kieran descended the steps slowly, and Amara moved with him, their hands still joined. There's a difference. One you'd understand if you'd bothered to study the old laws you claim to uphold. Semantics. Elder Frost's eyes were cold as her name. The council has ruled in your absence. We maintain order now. You are a relic of a failed system. A failed system? Power rippled through Kieran's voice. The peace I established lasted 2 centuries. Your council has been in power for 1, and already the packs teeter on the edge of civil war. Tell me again how my system failed. Murmurs rippled through the assembled warriors. Amara could see doubt flickering across faces. Wolves who'd grown up hearing stories of the Alpha King's reign, the golden age before the council's bureaucracy replaced singular leadership. Enough talk, Elder Thorn declared. You will submit to judgment, or we will take you by force. The girl will be cleansed of your influence and returned to her proper pack. No. Amara's voice rang clear and strong. I belong to no pack but my own choosing, and I choose him. The elder's attention snapped to her, predatory and dismissive. Child, you don't understand what he's done to you. The manipulation, the false bond. There's nothing false about it. Amara stepped forward, pulling Kieran with her. The crescent mark on her chest burned hot, visible even through her shirt as it began to glow. The moon goddess herself forged this bond. You want to challenge it? Then you challenge her. She raised her free hand, and moonlight erupted from her palm despite the sun's presence, pure silver radiance that shouldn't exist in daylight, but blazed anyway, fed by power inherited through blood and blessed by destiny. The warriors stumbled back. Even the elders looked unsettled. She bears the mark, someone whispered, the Lunar's mark. Impossible, Elder Blackwood hissed. The lunar bloodline died out. No. Kieran's voice cut through the confusion like a blade. It survived, hidden, protected, waiting for the moon's appointed time. He turned to address the assembled wolves, his presence expanding until every wolf present felt the crushing weight of his authority. I am Kieran Vega, crowned Alpha King by Moon Goddess's blessing 347 years ago. I did not abandon my throne. I was betrayed by those I trusted, poisoned and left to die. I survived. I healed. And I waited for the moon to reveal my true mate, the one who would stand beside me and restore what was stolen. He pulled Amara forward, presenting her to the gathered packs. This is Amara Hale, descended from Lunar Queen Seraphine through a bloodline kept secret for her protection. She carries the moon's blessing, the lunar's power, and my bond. She is your queen, whether you accept it or not. We don't accept it, Elder Thorn's power flared. Attack! Take them both! The warriors hesitated, torn between council orders and instincts that screamed danger. The ones who chose to attack never reached the palace steps. Amara's power exploded outward in a dome of silver light that caught the charging warriors mid-stride and sent them flying backward. They hit the ground hard but alive, stunned but unharmed. The light didn't fade. Instead, it solidified into a shimmering barrier that surrounded the palace, pulsing with energy that made even the elders take involuntary steps back. I will not harm wolves who are simply following orders, Amara said, her voice echoing with power that wasn't entirely her own. But I will not allow you to harm what's mine either. Kieran smiled, fierce and proud. He turned to face the elders directly. You have a choice. Acknowledge my return and Amara's place as Lunar Queen, or face the consequences of defying the moon's will. Never, Elder Thorn spat. We'll bring every pack in the territory against you. You'll have nowhere to... The sky darkened. Clouds rolled in impossibly fast, blotting out the sun until twilight fell at midday. And in that manufactured darkness the full moon appeared, blazing silver and impossibly large, dominating the sky with presence that made every wolf present drop to their knees in instinctive worship. The moon goddess had manifested. Her voice didn't speak in words, but in feelings that resonated through every wolf's soul, ancient, implacable, absolute. This bond is mine, this king is mine, this queen is mine. You do not question what I have joined. The pressure of her presence was crushing. Amara felt Kieran's hand tighten on hers, anchoring her as divine power washed over them both. The marks on their chests blazed so bright wolves had to look away, and where the light touched, new symbols appeared, crowns woven into the crescent scars, permanent declarations of their roles. Kieran Vega, Alpha King, Amara Hale, Lunar Queen. Let any who challenge this answer to me. The moon's presence faded gradually, but its message lingered in the sudden, absolute silence. One by one the warriors bowed, not to the council, to Kieran and Amara. The elders remained standing, their faces twisted with fury and disbelief. But even they couldn't deny what had just occurred. The moon goddess herself had spoken. To defy her will was to court death, or worse, to be cast out from the moon's blessing entirely, to become truly packless. This isn't over, Elder Thorn said, but the threat rang hollow. Yes, Kieran replied quietly. It is. Go back to your territories. Tell the packs what you witnessed here. The Alpha King has returned, and his Luna stands beside him. His eyes swept across the assembled wolves. Any who wish to challenge this are welcome to try. I've been merciful today. I may not be tomorrow. The elders retreated, their warriors following. Within minutes, the ruins emptied until only Kieran's guards remained, positioned discreetly at the perimeter, and Rylan, still kneeling where he'd dropped when the moon manifested. You can stand, Amara said softly. He rose slowly, his eyes never leaving the ground. I'm sorry, he whispered, for the rejection, for my cowardice, for not seeing what you were, what you are, until it was too late. You saw, Kieran said, not unkindly. That's why you rejected her, because you knew what claiming her would mean, and you weren't strong enough to face it. Rylan flinched but didn't deny it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just... He finally looked up, meeting Amara's gaze. I'm glad you found where you belong, even if it took my weakness to get you there. Amara felt nothing for him now. No love, no hate, just distant recognition of someone who'd once mattered. Go home, Rylan. Tell your pack the truth. Maybe they'll respect you more for honesty than they did for cowardice. He bowed deeply, to her, to Kieran, acknowledging their authority, and left. The sun broke through the clouds, normal daylight returning. The adrenaline of battle faded, leaving Amara suddenly exhausted. She swayed, and Kieran caught her, pulling her against his chest. "You were magnificent," he murmured. "I was terrified." Terrified and magnificent aren't mutually exclusive. He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You channeled the moon's power like you were born to it." "I suppose I was." She pulled back to look up at him, this ancient king who'd waited centuries for her. "What happens now?" "Now." Kieran's smile was soft, genuine. "Now we rebuild. The palace, the throne, the peace I once established. Together." "Together," she echoed, and the word felt like a vow. Music drifted on the wind, impossible, sourceless, but beautiful. The same haunting melody that had played during their first dance at the Midnight Howl Tavern. Kieran's expression shifted to something tender. "May I?" he asked, extending his hand with courtly grace. Amara's throat tightened with emotion. After everything, the battles, the revelations, the destiny thrust upon them, he was asking permission, treating her not as a possession but as a partner. "Could you dance with me?" she whispered, placing her hand in his. He smiled, eyes blazing like goldfire, ancient and eternal and hers. "For eternity, my queen." They moved together in the ruins of the Moon Palace, two halves of a bond 3 centuries in the making. No audience but the sun and the memory of the moon, no music but what the wind carried and their hearts provided. And as they danced, the palace around them began to glow. Not with destructive power or divine manifestation, but with simple, pure magic, the kind that comes from love and destiny finally aligned. Broken stones knit together, fallen columns rose, gardens burst into bloom with flowers that hadn't grown in 100 years. The Moon Palace was awakening, responding to its king and queen finally standing together where they belonged. When the dance ended and the music faded, Kieran dipped Amara low, his face hovering inches from hers. The bond between them sang with contentment, with rightness, with the absolute certainty that every moment of pain had led them exactly where they needed to be. "I love you," he said simply. "Across centuries, across lifetimes, across every obstacle the world could place between us. I love you." Tears slipped down Amara's cheeks. "I love you too." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Around them, the palace completed its restoration, and distant howls echoed as packs across the territory acknowledged their new and ancient rulers. The Alpha King had returned, and his Lunar Queen stood beside him, ready to face whatever came next. Together. Thank you so much for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next upload. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments what you think about this story and where you're watching from. Your support means a lot and helps us keep creating more stories like this. Until next time, stay safe, stay inspired.